name is Rudy Sarzo. Everybody was moving to Los Angeles, to become part of the showcase music scene. Because if you were based out of the Hollywood area, West Hollywood, basically, West Hollywood area, that meant that you were not part of the Valley or you were not part of the Orange County music scene. You were there to join a original band, get a record deal, that being a top 40 band. And that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I left Miami and everywhere else that I happened to play at, like in the Midwest, upstate New York and stuff like that. So I left because I came to Los Angeles to make it as a recording artist, touring artist, so on, with original material, not in a copy band. I could have stayed in Miami, which there was a very healthy top 40 scene, and not have to struggle and starve and sleep on the floor like I did. There was a reason why I came here. I came to LA in the 70s, and I gotta tell you, I burned my ship. There was no way I was going back where I came from. So I literally, right before I got the phone call to join OZZY, when I got the phone call to join OZZY, I was actually sleeping on the floor in Kevin DuBro's apartment. So, I went from like that, like as low as you can go, and just in a matter of minutes, I was living with OZZY and Sharon in the Arden's mansion, her father, Don Arden's mansion in the Hollywood Hills, Yeah, from the time that I first joined Quiet Riot with Randy Rhoads in 1978, that's when I officially joined the band. It was right at the cusp of Van Halen being the last rock band to get signed, metal band, rock, heavy rock. After that, they shut the doors because new wave and punk came in, huge. You have bands like the Knack, the Motels, Plimsolls, Devo, and that's what the record companies were focusing on. So we, the guys in Quiet Riot, were, like Randy, who was like maybe 22 years old at the time. Randy and Kevin DuBro, I mean, we were considered dinosaurs because they kept saying that music is never gonna come back. If you really want to, if you guys want to get a record deal, you have to, cut your hair, dress new wave or punk, or else you're not going to make it. Which is the reason why actually sooner or later Randy left in Los Angeles, left Quiet Riot and joined OZZY in the winter of 1979. And because this was a dead-end street right here in the Strip. I mean, places like the Starwood, where Quiet Riot was basically a house band, it turned into basically a punk place. All the punk bands were playing there. The whole landscape of the city really changed. So what happened is you have most of the bands that were around from the 70s that later made it at the very beginning of the 80s, part of that Sunset Strip explosion, that happened right after Metal Health, Quiet Riot record made it to the top of the charts. All the labels are looking to see what's going on in Sunset Strip here, and so you had versions of Motley Crue that used to be called London, already happening in the 70s. You had Dokken, different configuration of Dokken. You have Mickey Rat, which turned into Rat. You had Great White. And so it was the music was there, the bands were ready, all the musicians were ready to go, but it's kind of like it took a break. There was definitely a pause as far as rock and roll goes. Meanwhile, there was this British invasion of metal happening, the movement. You know, the new wave of metal was happening with Iron Maiden, Saxon, of course, OZZY, you know, and you had bands like Def Leppard and so on. But the scene in Los Angeles wasn't really either focusing on it or wasn't even aware, because they didn't have the type of networking that we have today. You know, something's really cool happening in London, just go on YouTube and check it out. Nobody knew. But in 1981, I got to witness all of that myself, because I became part of the new wave of British metal. Because by joining OZZY, I was automatically part of that movement, you know. And we have bands like Def Leppard, Starfighters. We had UFO, I mean, who at that time, they were already established band. Who else do we have? Oh, Motorhead. To me, like the most significant of all those bands that came out of that era. Because Motorhead was one of those bands that actually got bigger as time went on. Bigger from being a successful band to becoming a legend. In the 60s, British invasion, the Beatles come in. Well, you can't stop a musical movement that you have no control of, because it's coming from a different country and it's generating a lot of money. Now it becomes a really huge business. Not only do you have the Beatles, you got everybody that came after. Then you got the Stones, you got Dave Clark 5, you got the Kings, you got the Animals, Rolling Stones, you name it, everybody. It was generating a lot of money for the United States. Then, after that, in the 70s, then you start getting a little bit heavier. Start getting Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath. Jimi Hendrix was moving into a different direction. It was even getting heavier, getting jazzier, you know, getting in touch more with the Afro-American roots, you know, and the culture itself, you know. Then after that, punk came in. Again, all of the prog bands like Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, King Crimson, you have the response of punk. So it seems like music has kind of like destroys, you know, it comes in and it takes over. It's kind of like cleanses the palate or flushes the toilet, whichever way you like to look at it, you know, to bring in new music, you know. And then out of punk, then you know, basically the birth of the British metal invasion was very rooted in punk. You had the same fans that were, you know, going to punk shows. All of a sudden, they're going to like Iron Maiden shows. They're going to Motorhead shows, you know. And that itself came over to the United States. So having been there, I can tell you that the link of all of that to what happened on the Sunset Strip in early 80s started off on the Sunset Strip itself, took a break. Randy Rhoads went over to England, started working with OZZY, made two incredible records, iconic records, Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman. OZZY, you know, the Blizzard of Oz goes on the road. And OZZY started bringing, like, you know, Motorhead, opening band, Def Leppard, opening band, and that gave the American public a taste of what the British invasion of new wave of metal was all about. As a matter of fact, Quiet Riot, when we came out with Metal Health in 1983, we opened up for a lot of those bands. We opened up for Judas Priest in Europe and England, actually in England, and we did some shows in Europe. We opened up for Iron Maiden, you know, so we definitely, Black Sabbath was another band that we opened up in 1983. So we were all united, you know, as a movement of metal, whether you had the older bands like Black Sabbath, you know, playing along with Quiet Riot.